When we meet again. There's a stillness to Charleston in the early morning, before the horse-drawn carriages start clattering over the cobblestones, before the air thickens with heat and magnolia. I've always loved that hour when the city is still dressing herself for the day, when everything feels possible. I sat alone on the veranda of my townhouse off King Street, barefoot with a steaming mug of coffee balanced on the wrought iron railing. Below, the street was quiet. My phone buzzed beside me, already bloated with unread emails and missed calls. The world wanted something from me. As always, I was 35 years old, an architect with a name people in Charleston knew. Savannah Hartley, daughter of Ruth and Bennett Hartley, raised on family land just past Mount Pleasant, cotillion-trained College of Charleston educated, and by all accounts, successful. I restored homes the way some people restored old memories, with reverence and control. My firm specialized in preserving the bones of antebellum mansions while blending them with modern luxuries. My projects had been featured in Architectural Digest and Southern Living. Brides tagged me in engagement shoots. Interior designers begged to work with me. And yet, success has a way of settling on your shoulders like a velvet cape, luxurious, admired, and just heavy enough to stop you from moving too fast. Inside, Cameron was stirring. I heard the gentle creak of floorboards on the stairs. My fiancé. Always early to rise, always impeccably dressed, even on Saturdays. I could already picture the crisp white Oxford shirt, the navy slacks, the watch that probably cost more than most people's cars. His family was old money, and it showed in everything from the quiet confidence of his posture to the fact that he still wrote thank you notes by hand. We were a match made in Charleston perfection. Our engagement had been announced at a garden party hosted by his mother at the Langford estate. There were swans in the reflecting pond. His proposal had come beneath a wisteria arbor in spring. There'd been no surprises and no butterflies. "Morning," Cameron said as he stepped onto the veranda and pressed a quick kiss to my hair. His voice was smooth, rehearsed. "Morning." He took the seat beside me and unfolded the Post and Courier. No questions about my sleep, no shared silence, just routine, safe, civil. I stared into my coffee as if it might answer the question I couldn't ask myself out loud. Is this what love is supposed to feel like? Brooke called later that morning. My phone buzzed as I stood in the middle of a kitchen renovation project in south of Broad, covered in dust and blueprints. "Are you alive or buried in crown molding?" she asked. "Both." Her laugh was the same as college, wild and unfiltered. "I'm sending you something, and before you say no, just shut up and accept that you need it." I'm afraid to ask. "It's a cruise," she said. 1 week. Caribbean, sunshine, tequila, and possibly attractive men who aren't named Cameron Langford III. "Brooke, you're 35, Savannah. Your life is beige and well curated and, frankly, a little tragic." "I'm engaged." "You're settling," she shot back. "You're curating a catalog marriage. You need a week away from your life, away from the meetings, the antique staircases, and that smug bastard who wears monogrammed slippers." I laughed. "He does not—" "I know he does." There was a pause. Brooke's voice softened. "I'm serious, Vanna. When's the last time you did something reckless?" The answer slid into my throat and stayed there. Too long ago. Maybe never. "I already booked it. We leave from Miami next Sunday. No excuses." That evening, I sat across from Cameron in a restaurant that had a 3-month wait list and a Michelin star. We ordered the prix without glancing. He complimented the duck confit with the authority of a food critic. Halfway through dessert, I heard myself say, "What would you do if I took a trip with Brooke next week?" He looked up, blinking. "A trip?" "Just a cruise, 1 week. I need a little reset." Cameron took a slow sip of his Bordeaux. "Well," he said finally, "I suppose if it's with Brooke, that's harmless." There was no protest, no emotion, just a polite concession. That night, he kissed me goodnight with all the warmth of a cool shower, and I lay awake in our shared bed, staring at the ceiling fan, wondering how long I'd been playing a role I didn't remember auditioning for. Packing felt oddly exhilarating. I left my phone on the dresser when I zipped my bag shut. Brooke met me in Miami with a hug that knocked the air out of me and a pina colada in each hand. "You look like someone who just escaped captivity," she grinned. "I feel like I just broke out of my own life." We boarded the ship under a cobalt sky, and for the first time in what felt like years, I let go of control. No blueprints, no client meetings, no Cameron, just me, the ocean, and 7 days to remember who I was before I became someone else's version of me. I didn't know then that fate was already moving its pieces, and that the man who would change everything was just across the deck, watching the sea with a haunted kind of calm. The second day of the cruise dawned warm and glowing, the sea gleaming like molten sapphire, and the air thick with salt and possibility. I had slept like someone whose body remembered desire even if her mind wasn't ready to name it. Brooke was already sunbathing by the pool when I emerged, sunglasses on, drink in hand, tan lines artfully arranged. I dropped into the lounge chair beside her, still trying to shake the surrealness of being off grid. No emails, no meetings, just sun, water, and space. But it wasn't the sea or the sky that stole my attention that morning. It was him. He stood at the upper deck railing, alone, nursing a coffee like it held the meaning of life. A white linen shirt clung to his body, unbuttoned halfway, tan skin, a slow, thoughtful posture. The kind of man who didn't posture, didn't preen, because he didn't need to. He wasn't performing for anyone. He was watching the ocean like it had hurt him, and I was watching him like I might drown in the gravity of it. Brooke glanced over the top of her sunglasses. "Jesus, you're obvious. Do you know him?" She smirked. "Nolan Maddox, novelist, widower, brooding, brilliant, tragically off limits. Basically, every book club's dream." I blinked. "He's that Nolan Maddox?" Brooke grinned. Pulitzer nominated. Reclusive as hell. Rumor is he dropped out of the New York scene and moved to the mountains after his wife died. Now he paints when he isn't writing about lonely men and complicated women." I looked back at him. He was still staring at the sea, still alone, still magnetic. I wasn't trying to find him later that day, not really, but fate or desire has a way of taking over. I turned a corner in one of the quiet hallways on the lower deck, distracted by a ridiculous painting of a dolphin in a tuxedo, and walked straight into a solid wall of warm, living muscle. My drink sloshed. His hands caught my arms before I could stumble. "Sorry," I gasped, pulling back. "I wasn't looking." "It's okay," he said, voice low, rough. "Neither was I." His hands dropped, and I looked up fully into his face. Gray blue eyes, shadowed jaw, mouth with just enough curve to promise trouble. "You're Savannah Hartley," he said. I blinked. "How do you know that?" He lifted a brow. "I asked someone after I saw you staring at me for an hour this morning." Heat rose in my cheeks. I was not staring. "You were," he said with a grin. "It was flattering. I should have walked away, should have made some dry comment and kept moving, but I didn't. Instead, I asked, 'Why were you watching the water like you hated it?'" His smile faded. "I don't hate it," he said quietly, "but it has a habit of showing you exactly what you're missing." And I swear the ship tilted beneath me. We had drinks that night on the upper deck, under a sky so full of stars it felt like they'd broken free of gravity. I hadn't laughed like that in years. His sarcasm was razor sharp, but beneath it was warmth, a rare, careful heat that came in glances, pauses, small confessions. He told me about his house in Asheville, half collapsed, haunted, feels like home. I told him about Charleston. Too perfect, too curated. I've been holding my breath for years. There was a long silence after that, not awkward, just full. Finally, he said, "I don't usually do this. I'm not the cruise fling kind of guy." "Good," I said, "because I'm not the cruise fling kind of woman." He smiled slowly. "What are you then?" he asked. I looked into my wine glass, then at him. Someone who's starting to remember what it feels like to be seen. He leaned in, close enough that I could smell sea salt and whiskey. I knew you were dangerous the second I saw you. Me? Dangerous how? He didn't smile. You look like someone who kisses once and ruins a man for everyone after. My breath caught. I opened my mouth, closed it again. Wouldn't know, I whispered. His gaze flicked down to my lips, then back up. Well, he said, there's still time. We didn't sleep together that first night, but I barely slept. I kept replaying his words, the heat in his eyes, the way his hand had brushed mine during the walk back to my room. My skin buzzed from it. My mind spun. And when I stepped out onto my balcony that morning, barefoot and braless under a linen shirt, he was leaning over the railing of the next cabin, coffee in one hand, the kind of smirk that made bad decisions feel like destiny on his lips. Morning, he said. Morning. Sleep well. No. His grin deepened. Same. By day 4, we were inseparable. We swam together in a cove, off a private island, far from the ship and its judgment. He teased me about my cautious dives. I called him out for pretending to read when he was watching me sunbathe. There was always a charge between us, always a slow build, like a storm gathering heat beneath blue skies. That night we kissed. It happened in the corridor outside the piano lounge. We were too drunk on each other to care about the people around us. His hand was warm at my waist, my palm flat against his chest, our laughter dying into silence. Then he kissed me. Hungry, hot, like he'd wanted to from the moment we met and had finally lost the will to wait. I kissed him back with everything I had, and I didn't stop. We didn't make it to his room or mine. We stumbled into an unused spa lounge, couches, soft lighting, the scent of lavender and citrus, and fell into each other like a secret we'd both waited too long to confess. His mouth on my neck, my fingers tangled in his shirt, his hands gripping my thighs, as if grounding himself. I shouldn't want you this much, he murmured against my skin. Then don't stop. He didn't. That night, Nolan made love to me with reverence and fire, like he was worshiping and remembering at the same time, like he'd been starving, and I was the only thing that could fill the ache. And when we were tangled on that couch afterward, bodies slick, limbs bare, breath slowing, he said the one thing that made the world tilt again. I've never done this before. I turned to him, confused. What? Fallen like this, fast, deep, and wanted it to last. My throat closed. Me neither. By day 6, I knew I wouldn't recover from him. He walked with me to the edge of the deck at sunset, the world bathed in gold. His fingers brushed mine. I'll be in Asheville 6 months from now, Valentine's Day, he said. If you're there, I'll know. And if I'm not, I won't ask why. His voice was a whisper now. But if you come, I'll come, I said. I swear. We kissed one last time, slow, aching, and then I walked away. I didn't look back, because I knew if I did, I wouldn't leave at all. The morning I returned to Charleston, the sun was sharp and unforgiving. I stood in my entryway, still wearing travel clothes and salt-stiff hair, surrounded by silence that felt colder than it had any right to be. Everything looked the same. My furniture, my curated color palette, the antique framed maps. Cameron's copy of the Wall Street Journal lay folded neatly on the console table. He must have dropped by to collect some clothes while I was away, but I was different. It was as if something had cracked open inside me during those 6 days. Some hidden vault of feeling I hadn't known was sealed, and now I couldn't close it again. The worst part was I didn't want to. Cameron came over that evening. He smelled like bergamot and ambition. The scent that had once comforted me now made me feel like I was being smothered in a boardroom. Welcome home, he said, handing me a bouquet of white roses. Perfectly symmetrical. Of course. Thanks, I replied, trying to keep my voice steady. We had dinner in the dining room I'd restored myself, the crown molding above us so flawless it mocked me. Cameron talked about a merger his firm was advising on, a dinner with his parents, a new French place opening downtown. I nodded, replied in soft tones. But inside, my heart was thudding like a warning bell. He didn't ask how the trip was. He didn't ask if I missed him. I realized with a kind of distant sorrow that we'd become two people playing assigned roles in a play neither of us wanted to be in anymore. Halfway through dessert, I looked at him across the table and said, gently but clearly, I can't marry you. He didn't flinch. Cameron set his fork down, wiped his mouth with a linen napkin, and nodded once. I wondered when you'd say it. His calm unnerved me more than any shouting could have. You deserve more than what we've become, I added, even though the words felt like a borrowed script. And you found it, haven't you? He asked, meeting my gaze. I didn't reply. I didn't need to. Cameron exhaled slowly, leaned back. I always knew you had more passion in you than you let the world see. I guess I just hoped you'd grow tired of chasing it. The words weren't bitter, just honest. We parted like business partners dissolving a contract, with courtesy, with silence, with clean lines and no emotional wreckage. The next day, I boxed up the engagement photos. The ring went into a drawer I didn't open again. My parents didn't understand. My mother, Ruth, called me every other day for a week, her voice tinged with that high society edge that only appears when someone's social standing has been bruised. He was good to you, Savannah. I know. Your father's friends were already planning the garden party. I know. What will people say? I don't care. She didn't believe me. Maybe I didn't believe it either, but I said it enough times that it started to sound like truth. Brooke, of course, was thrilled. You finally grew a spine, Hartley. Took you long enough. But even she could see the strain in my eyes. You okay? I don't know, I admitted. It's like I opened a door and now I can't go back. You're not supposed to. The months that followed were both cruel and golden. I buried myself in work. I redesigned a Queen Anne townhouse near Broad Street, took on a daring restoration of a hurricane-damaged inn in Beaufort. My firm expanded, my reputation soared, clients praised my vision, contractors admired my speed. But at night, always at night, I thought of Nolan, of how he watched the world like it had secrets, of how he kissed like a man who had learned the value of time, of how when I laughed, he didn't just smile. He watched me like he was memorizing it. And more than anything, I thought of that promise. Valentine's Day, 6 months. If you still feel this way, come find me. I marked the date on my calendar in faint pencil. I didn't tell Brooke. I didn't tell anyone. It wasn't a decision I could explain. It was a seed, quiet, buried deep, waiting to bloom or die. There were days when I doubted everything. What if it was just a dream? 6 days of escape from a life I didn't want to admit I'd outgrown. What if Nolan had moved on, regretted the promise? What if I showed up and he wasn't there? But in my quietest moments, I knew the truth. What we had wasn't fantasy. It was something rare, something real enough to risk everything for, something that lived in the space between fear and faith. So I waited. And as the weeks melted into months and Charleston's sweetgrass browned with winter's touch, I held tight to one thought. If he meant it, if I meant it, we'll find our way back. The night before Valentine's Day, I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, heart hammering like a metronome for a life I hadn't started yet. The weather called for rain. I didn't care. I packed my bag with trembling hands, jeans, a cashmere sweater, an old pair of boots, one emerald scarf he'd once complimented. I printed out directions to his address in Asheville, though I already knew the route by heart. 8 hours by car, through the low country, into the hills, up into the Blue Ridge where he waited, maybe. At dawn, I left a note for Brooke, just one line. If this works out, I'll call you. If not, never mention it again. I turned the key in my ignition and drove off into the gray morning, the only certainty I had stitched into my heartbeat like a prayer. Let him be there. The rain started somewhere outside of Columbia. It was the kind of rain that blurred the world into watercolor, trees smudged into gray, headlights glimmering like half-formed memories. I turned the wipers to their highest setting and kept driving, knuckles tight around the steering wheel. My GPS flickered as I passed through stretches of back roads with no signal, but I didn't need it. I knew the turns by heart. Nolan had told me once his house was just outside Asheville, an old blue-gray Victorian sitting at the edge of a hill, still wrapped in scaffolding back then. He'd talked about it like it was a living thing. The porch has fallen apart, the floorboards moan like they've seen too much. But it's home, or will be, once I'm done with it. I pictured him there as I drove, sitting on that porch, coffee in hand, waiting for me. Maybe he'd have music playing. Maybe he'd pretend to be surprised when he saw me pull in. But I knew if he was still the man I remembered, he'd been hoping for me every day since July. And I was coming. I was almost there. By the time I hit the city limits of Asheville, the rain had turned to sleet. The GPS came alive again, blinking as it adjusted the route. I was 2 turns away. Just 2. A red light appeared at the base of a steep hill. I slowed. The tires hissed against the wet pavement. I didn't see the truck until the last second. It came from the left, fast, heavy, blaring through the intersection. I saw metal. I saw light. I felt the sickening weight of time stretching into a single frozen instant. And then, impact. The next thing I knew, everything was white. Ceiling tiles, fluorescent lights, the distant beep of machines. My mouth was dry. My ribs screamed with each breath. My hip throbbed like it had been cracked open. I couldn't move, couldn't turn my head. All I could see was a pale blue curtain and a blurry IV drip. "Miss Hartley?" a nurse said softly, stepping into view. She was young, kind-eyed. "You've been in an accident." My voice came out as a hoarse whisper. "How long?" "2 days," she said gently. "You were unconscious when the ambulance brought you in. You're very lucky. It could have been worse." 2 days, Valentine's Day, gone. I didn't cry right away. I went still. I stared at the ceiling and thought of Nolan pacing the porch, checking the time, watching the road, waiting for headlights that never came. I imagined him sitting there until sunset, until the sky turned violet and the wind picked up and he gave up. He thought I didn't want him. He thought I walked away. He'd touched every part of me, inside and out, and he'd believed I abandoned him. The grief that welled up was sharp and shameful. But I said nothing. To the nurses, to Brooke, to Nolan. I didn't tell anyone because I didn't know how. I didn't go to him. I could have, I should have, but I didn't. I was broken, not just physically, emotionally, and shame is a heavy thing to carry to someone's doorstep. So I left Asheville with bruised ribs, a fractured hip, and a silence that stretched so far I couldn't find the end of it. Charleston had never looked so empty. Everything familiar now felt artificial. My house, my projects, the polite clients with their reclaimed heart pine and their manicured grief. I went back to work like nothing had happened. I smiled. I attended ribbon cuttings. I redesigned a guest house for a couple I could barely stand. No one knew that my heart had stayed behind, in a house I never saw. 3 months passed, then 5, then 10. I didn't hear from Nolan. I told myself he hadn't tried, that he hadn't wanted to, but sometimes in the quiet I wondered if he had, if there'd been an email I'd missed, a letter that got lost, a voicemail I deleted without listening to. But I never looked. I couldn't. I saw his name once in a bookstore on Meeting Street, his latest novel, hardcover, A Woman Walking Alone on a Pier Under Stormy Skies. I bought it, read it in one sitting, and when I closed it, I wept into my hands in the dark, because the woman in the book was me, and she never came back. By the following spring, I had stopped waiting for closure. Some wounds don't heal. They simply become quieter. I focused on the house I was building outside of Folly Beach. Modern, wide windows, white walls, sharp angles, no history to preserve, just a blank page. But I couldn't bring myself to furnish it. There was a part of me that still felt like a ghost, a woman caught in the space between what was and what might have been. Time, I've learned, doesn't move in a straight line. Some days it flies, other days it crawls. And sometimes, when the memory of someone you loved sits quietly in your bones, it circles like a hawk, waiting for you to look away long enough for it to strike again. It had been 11 months since the accident, 11 months since I nearly died 2 blocks from Nolan's door, since the day he must have stood on that porch waiting, only to find an empty road and a promise that never arrived. I often wondered what he'd done. Did he wait an hour? Two? Did he stay outside, clutching his mug of coffee until the sun dipped behind the mountains? Did he think I'd changed my mind? That I got scared? That I never really meant it? I never let myself imagine more than that. Anything deeper hurt too much. But then January came, and with it, a letter. It was addressed to my office. No return address. No handwriting I recognized. Inside was a formal invitation, printed on thick cardstock in understated gray ink. Historic Preservation in the Modern South, an architectural and cultural symposium. Keynote speaker, Savannah Hartley venue, Asheville Museum of Southern Arts. February 14th. My name, my profession, the city. I stared at the paper for a long time before I noticed the detail at the bottom of the itinerary. Guest exhibit, Structures of the Heart, featuring works by Nolan Maddox. My breath caught. It wasn't a message. It wasn't even signed, but it was him. Brooke knew something was off the second she walked into my office and saw the envelope on my desk. Someone die? She asked lightly, setting down her bag. You look like you just saw a ghost. Something like that, I murmured. When I told her, she blinked. Then she grinned. Well, well, the recluse rises. I don't know what this is, I admitted. It's not a message. It's not even personal. Savannah, she said gently, you think this is a coincidence? He knew where to send it. He knew what it would do to you. I shook my head. He probably just heard about the conference and submitted his work. That's all. Brooke leaned over the desk and looked me dead in the eyes. You're going. It wasn't a question. The week before the conference was a blur of packing, planning, and second-guessing. I told myself it was professional, that it was just a speaking engagement, that I would attend, deliver my talk, view the exhibit, and leave. But my heart wasn't listening. Each time I saw his name on the itinerary, it skipped like a record. Each time I rehearsed my keynote in the mirror, I saw the woman I used to be, full of hope, standing in front of a door that never opened. I still didn't know if he'd recognize me, if he'd welcome me, if he even wanted me there. But the ache of not knowing had become unbearable. And so, on February 13th, I packed a bag, filled the tank of my car, and drove toward the mountains I once turned away from. This time, there was no sleet, no accident, no crash, only the hum of the highway beneath me and the promise that maybe, just maybe, fate would give me a second chance to get it right. The city of Asheville was painted in winter's breath, bare trees, crisp air, mountain mist curling through the streets like ribbon. The hotel they'd booked for speakers was modest, comfortable. I checked in, set my bag on the neatly made bed, and walked to the window. Somewhere out there, Nolan was alive, creating, painting, waiting. I didn't sleep that night, just stared at the ceiling and whispered questions into the dark. Would he speak to me? Would he walk away? What if I was too late again? The next morning, I dressed carefully, professional but soft. Charcoal gray slacks, a pale blue blouse, and a scarf the color of pine. My hands trembled as I pinned my badge to my jacket. Savannah Hartley, keynote speaker. The name felt foreign, like I was wearing someone else's skin. But I walked into the museum with my shoulders square and my heart pounding like thunder beneath a calm sea. I didn't see him at first. The conference was buzzing, architects mingling, preservationists sipping coffee, volunteers passing out branded tote bags. My name was printed on signage outside the lecture hall. People smiled at me like I was important. But I only had one question burning in my chest. Where is he? I found the gallery by accident. It was tucked into the east wing, quiet and dimly lit. A plaque at the entrance read, Structures of the Heart, New Works by Nolan Maddox. I stepped inside and stopped breathing. The first painting I saw was of me, standing at the railing of the cruise ship in that green dress, wind in my hair, head tilted back just slightly, as if daring the world to touch me. I froze. Everything inside me screamed and sighed at once, because he hadn't just remembered me. He had studied me, loved me, through pigment, canvas, shape, and light. There were more paintings. One of a woman asleep on a couch, my arm draped over my stomach, the line of my hip barely veiled by a sheet. His gaze hadn't flinched from the truth of our nights together. Not just sex. Need. Closeness. He'd painted the version of me I tried to forget, naked and real and wanted. And then, his voice behind me, I thought maybe you'd never see these. I turned, and there he was. He stood a few feet away, broader than I remembered, still barefoot in spirit, even in shoes. Nolan, I whispered. I waited, he said, voice low. I waited all day. I was coming, I said quickly. I swear to God, there was a truck. My voice broke. I woke up in a hospital, 2 days later. His jaw flexed, his eyes burned. Jesus. I couldn't reach you. I couldn't move. And when I could, I was scared. Of me? Of what it would do to you. Of what it would do to me if you didn't believe me. He stepped closer, just enough for the air to change. I would have believed you, he said. I wanted to. My eyes brimmed. You thought I walked away? He nodded slowly. I thought you didn't want me, he said. That maybe I made it bigger than it was in my own head, and it felt like losing you twice. We stood there in the stillness of the gallery, surrounded by ghosts we'd painted and sculpted and imagined into being. This exhibit, I said finally, it's about me. He exhaled. Not all of it, but most of it, yeah. My voice cracked. Why? Because I didn't know how to let you go. He moved closer. I could see the lines at the corners of his mouth now, etched deeper than they were a year ago. I painted you, he continued, because it was the only way I could keep you real. Everything else, our conversations, your laugh, the way you fell asleep on my shoulder, it all started to feel like a dream. But the canvas, those stayed. We didn't hug, not yet, but something in us softened. He gestured toward the gallery doors. Do you want to go somewhere quiet? Yes, I breathed. We walked to a bar 2 blocks away. Dim lights, a booth in the back. He ordered whiskey. I got water with lemon. We didn't talk about Charleston, or my accident, or our silence. We talked about his work, about his son Jude, about the house. He smiled when he said the porch had been rebuilt. Still creaks when it rains, though. I touched my glass. I've missed the way you talk about things like they're alive. I've missed the way you look when you're trying not to cry. I swallowed. And I've missed the way you taste when I kiss you, he added, voice soft, steady. Heat flooded me. I met his eyes. No flinch, no smirk, just honesty. I haven't been with anyone else since you, I said. Same. I didn't think I'd ever want to be touched again. I've only wanted to touch you. We sat there in the low light, the weight of our past between us like a sheet we could finally start peeling back. Outside, the sky was soft and gray, street lamps flickering in the mist. He looked at me. I'm not asking you to stay. I know you're still healing. I know this is a lot. I stepped closer. But if you wanted to see the house... My breath hitched. Yes, I said. I do. The house stood on a hill just beyond the city limits, half wrapped in the last frost of winter, still breathing in the silence between seasons. It looked both older and newer than I expected. Nolan had told me it was a ruin when he bought it, windows broken, porch sagging, raccoons in the attic. But now the glass gleamed in the sunlight. The porch stood proud beneath thick white columns, and the air around it pulsed with quiet warmth. A home full of breath and intention. He opened the door like he was welcoming something sacred. You kept it warm, I said. He gave a small smile. I tried. He walked me through each room, and when we reached the studio, he paused. This one's still unfinished. On the easel was another painting of me. This time I was standing on a porch, hand raised as if to knock, but I hadn't. Tears slipped down my cheeks before I could stop them. I wanted to, I whispered. I know. That night, we didn't tiptoe around it. We didn't talk in riddles or leave rooms with questions still hanging in the air. We made dinner, we drank wine, we played music, and then he kissed me in the hallway, hard, desperate, and everything between us reignited like a fuse finally allowed to spark. I pulled at his shirt. He lifted me with one arm and pinned me against the wall. His mouth was on my neck, my collarbone, my lips again, insistent and reverent. We didn't stumble. We claimed. He carried me upstairs into a bedroom I'd imagined 1,000 times. The sheets were soft, the windows open, the wind cold. But inside, we were fire. Every touch was a memory returning. Every sound was forgiveness. Every gasp was a vow we hadn't had the chance to speak. And when we collapsed together, wrapped in skin and sweat and relief, he whispered into my hair, "Don't leave this time." I kissed his throat. "I'm already home." The house felt different now. It wasn't just Nolan's anymore. It was ours, in that quiet, claiming way that doesn't need a conversation. The kind of shift that happens after you've made love in every room you used to avoid. He still worked in the studio most mornings, brush in hand, bare feet on hardwood, shirtless more often than not. I kept pretending I wasn't watching him until he smirked and beckoned me over with paint on his fingers. We fell into a rhythm quickly, effortlessly, like no time had passed, like the year of silence had been nothing more than a breath between heartbeats. But it hadn't been. We were different now, more deliberate, more honest, more willing. He cooked for me. I organized his mess. He kissed me over the stove, soft and slow, like we had all the time in the world. I slid into his lap when he read on the porch and stole lazy kisses that turned into hours under blankets. Some mornings we didn't make it out of bed, some nights we didn't make it to sleep, but it wasn't just lust. It was the kind of intimacy that ached, the kind that came from knowing what it felt like to lose each other and not being willing to risk it again. I'd roll over at night and find his hand already reaching, like he'd been waiting even in sleep. On the second weekend of October, Nolan brought home a broken table. It was a squat square thing, oak, scuffed, two legs wobbly and warped. I raised an eyebrow as he wrestled it through the front door. "Do we need more projects?" I asked, laughing. He grinned. "We need more memories." He set it down in the studio, wiped the dust from the top, and looked at me. "This was my parents' table," he said. "We ate every meal on it, argued, played cards. My dad taught me how to draw on it." My smile faded as I stepped closer. It was in storage all these years. I figured, if I'm building a home again, I should bring a piece of where I came from. I touched the wood gently, feeling the grooves like scars. "I love it," I whispered. He nodded, quiet. "Then let's fix it." We worked on it for days. Nolan sanded, I stained. We replaced the legs, sealed the surface, argued over the grain. It was messy and loud and imperfect, just like everything else that mattered. On the final day, we brought it into the kitchen and set it in the center of the room. The light hit it just right, warm, clean. We stood there side by side, staring down at the table, and then he said so softly I almost missed it, "I'd like to build the rest of this life with you too." He looked at me fully, then said, "Marry me." My heart stuttered. "Nolan, I don't need a crowd or a big ceremony. I just need you to stay." I ran my fingers down his chest, felt the tremble in his breath. "Then I will." No hesitation and no fear, just the most yes I'd ever felt in my bones. I called Brooke from the front porch one afternoon. She screamed so loudly I had to pull the phone away from my ear. "I knew it! I knew he'd still have you in a headboard grip by spring. I laughed. He proposed this morning. Girl, he's always been proposing, with every stare, every brushstroke. I didn't think I could still feel this way, I said, quieter. I always knew you could, she replied. You just needed someone to burn for. We didn't plan a wedding. Our families came anyway. Somehow, meeting your love's family makes them even more real. We said our vows at the local church and then treated our families to dinner at the little Italian restaurant in town. Not what my mother wanted, but what we wanted. Simple, quiet, meaningful. We chose each other that day, and every day after that, again and again and again. Some days we still fought. I snapped when the paint cans overflowed into my drafting space. He grumbled when I alphabetized his record collection, but every fight ended the same way. Hands, lips, need, truth pulled from skin and soul alike, and Nolan burns for me. Every night, every morning, in words and hands, and looks that say, you are mine, I am yours. Still, we didn't pick up where we left off. We started over, on solid ground, no silence, no missed chances, just the kind of love that holds you even after the world drops you. And on the eve of our first Valentine's Day back together, I stood in the doorway of the bedroom, watching him pull the blankets back on our bed. He looked up, smiled like a man who had everything he wanted, and then said, same porch, same time, tomorrow. I smiled back. Wouldn't miss it for the world. The house creaks in the morning. It's the good kind of creaking, the kind that tells you the walls are holding strong, even as they stretch and sigh with age. I love it. The sound of wood warming in the light, the sound of a home alive. A year has passed since I said yes on this porch, a full circle, quietly completed. The leaves are gold again. The hills outside shimmer with fire, and the chill in the air tastes like cinnamon and promises. I'm standing in the doorway of our kitchen, barefoot, wrapped in an old cardigan, watching Nolan brew coffee. His hair is messy. He hums under his breath. We've been married almost 10 months, and I still catch myself staring, not because I'm trying to memorize the moment, but because I know now, I don't have to. This is forever. The house is finished, more or less. Nolan built new bookshelves in the den last month. I repainted the guest bathroom a soft, dusty blue. We've added a few pieces of furniture, nothing matchy, everything with history. The table we restored together still sits in the middle of the kitchen. Its legs are solid. Its wood scarred and honest. We eat there most nights, sometimes in silence, sometimes with wine and laughter, sometimes with friends, sometimes with just a candle flickering between us and a quiet mutual gratitude that no one speaks aloud. I returned to Charleston briefly last spring. A client begged, a historical commission insisted. I agreed hesitantly. It felt strange at first, like slipping into a dress I hadn't worn in years. Everything was still beautiful, still gilded, but I saw it differently now. With clearer eyes, I walked past the old townhouse on King Street and felt nothing. No ache, no anger, just the gentle grace of having outgrown it. Brooke met me for dinner. She still lived there, still talked too fast and laughed too loud. But she looked at me across that table, glass of wine in one hand, elbow on the tablecloth, and said, you're different now. I know. You're happy. I really am. She didn't ask for details. She didn't need them. In the months that followed, Nolan's work exploded. His newest collection, Quiet Rebuilds, was picked up by a major gallery in Atlanta. Reviewers called it his most intimate, evolved work yet. He shrugged off the praise, as he always does, but I caught him once in his studio, looking at a finished canvas with a softness I'd never seen before. You're proud, I said. I'm grounded, he replied. He still paints me sometimes, rarely directly, but I know the shape of myself in his brushstrokes. A woman leaning against a window, a hand smoothing linen sheets, the curve of a back walking down a hall of open doors. Every version of me he paints is becoming, still in motion, still growing. We don't talk about the accident anymore, not because we've buried it, but because we've forgiven it. It doesn't own us. It taught us the hard way that time doesn't always honor the heart, but that the heart, if it's strong enough, can survive the weight. Nolan once told me that real love doesn't just burn, it holds. And that's what we've built. A lot of fire, some frenzy, and always hands holding. Today is February 14th, Valentine's Day, a date that used to feel like a wound. Now, it's something else. A small, quiet celebration, a memory that chose to stay instead of fade. We don't do cards or roses or fancy dinners. We never have. Instead, we wake up slowly, we make pancakes, we listen to old jazz records, and then every year we do the same thing. We drive out to the old church where we were married. We visit it every Valentine's Day to honor the love we have, and then we drive home to honor the passion we feel. Later, as I lie beside him in bed, his hand curled over mine beneath the covers, I think about the story we wrote. Not with chapters, not with climaxes, but with days, with choice, with breath. It wasn't a fairy tale. It was something better. Earned. So if anyone ever asks me what love is, what real, stubborn, second chance love is, I'll say this. It's a house at the edge of the hills. It's a door left open. It's a voice that says, I'm still here, and another that answers, so am I.
Thank you for joining us for this episode of Storytime with Papa Al. If you enjoyed the story, please like and subscribe.